What's good, y'all?
Here, bro.
What's good?
Here.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Always happy to come to the lovely island of Staten. It's wonderful. Staten Island Ferry is great. It's free. The only free ride in the world. Gotta love it. We are going to start off with an excerpt from Buttered Roll's imaginary Wikipedia page. Subheading: Señorita Roll. Buttered Roll, or the person that would eventually be known as Buttered Roll, was born in the back seat of a 1974 Chevy Nova Baby Blue. Only mother and baby engaged in the battle of childbirth. The owner of the 1974 Chevy Nova was sound asleep in his home. Unbeknownst to him, a woman he would never meet was now giving birth to a person that would become a not-so-complex carbohydrate in the backseat of the automobile that he adored. An automobile that would curiously give off the faint scent of pan de bono for the remainder of its existence. Señorita Roll, 20 years old at the time of birth, was a dissident member of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. She absconded from her faction at 5 months, not wanting her child to be subject to their draconian family planning. From their outpost in the Andes, approximately 15 miles northeast of Bogota, Señorita Roll managed to make her way to the shoulder of Highway 45A. From there, she hitched a ride into the Barrancas Norte neighborhood of the city. She had a friend who agreed to put her up until the baby was born. 3 days before she gave birth, Señorita Roll drafted a letter expressing gratitude for the hospitality and left it on the bed she had been in for the majority of the last 4 months. For the following 2 days and nights, she wandered the neighborhood, full term, doing her best to stay out of sight. When her water broke, she crept into the back seat of the first unlocked car that she found, which happened to be a baby blue Chevy Nova. 11 hours later, she gave birth to young Alberto, who was eventually to be known as Buttered Roll. Due to the circumstances surrounding Señorita Roll's severance with the FARC, giving birth in a hospital was not an option for her. The FARC have a wide network of paid and otherwise coerced informants and loyalists. They have eyes in all of the nooks and crannies of the Andes Mountains and had disseminated an APB for Señorita Roll. The FARC and most of the other paramilitary organizations in the country would rather have a dead dissident than a living informant. Señorita Roll would be on the run for the remainder of her existence. She was captured and eventually executed in the 26th year of her life. As for baby Alberto, soon to be Jason, then Buttered Roll, he spent the first 12 hours of his life asleep on top of his mother in the back seat of a baby blue Chevy Nova. As soon as she found the energy, Señorita Roll made her way to a non-governmental organization that was located on the east side of the Barrancas Norte. This NGO was known in several cities across the nation as one that would house and potentially relocate internal refugees. Hundreds of thousands of people had been displaced in Colombia since La Violencia began. Baby Alberto may never have transubstantiated into a not-so-complex carbohydrate had he stayed in the country. The civil war that became known as La Violencia began in 1948 and raged across the country for 10 years. As is historically the case, the overwhelming majority of the violence had been exacted on the backs of the underclass. Thousands of families had been ravaged. By some accounts, the death toll had reached 2 million, and by the time the peace accord was drawn. But peace brought a new type of violence. Under the guise of accelerated economic development, the first years of the 1960s saw thousands of small landowning families forcefully displaced. Their land was consolidated, and a few large-scale private farming corporations purchased these large tracts of land and used them to produce goods that were then exported. The newly formed National Front had opened the floodgates to foreign investment in the early 1960s. And by the time that Baby Alberto, soon to be Buttered Roll, entered into this existence, the perverse and cold-blooded rationality of neoliberalism had run rampant over the nation. Unbeknownst to Baby Alberto, he entered this life as a piece of collateral damage in a nation torn apart by civil strife. A brand new bastard, without blood relation and wholly reliant on the charity of strangers. Following 4 short months as Baby Alberto, soon to be Buttered Roll would travel to a largely white suburb of Philadelphia with his new family and a new name. Buttered Roll would not return to his native soil for the next 26 years. A brief mention of Buttered Roll's biological father. Senor Roll was inexplicably killed when a large rock fell from out of the sky and crushed his skull while he was relieving himself on a tree in the northern Andes Mountains. Thank you.